I think he's absolutely innocent of the murder of President Kennedy or Officer Tippett. And I would like for people in official capacity who say that he is guilty to come up with the proof. Absolutely. Not one-sided, but all evidence on the table. And only then to decide if he's guilty and innocent. I know he's innocent. But the danger of the truth not being known will destroy this nation, actually. They maybe don't believe me, but that's the fact.
Whoa, boy, that was a prophetic statement, huh?
Yeah, interesting timing too, coming out.
I know.
Maybe she's finally going to get her wish soon.
Well, that was 1997, I think. So that was about 30 years ago. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Clearly, it's in the zeitgeist now with the JFK files ostensibly coming out. And, you know, I was thinking about it last night, how there's more than just the files. Like, we need from the current incoming Trump IRS director. Now, keep in mind, the IRS phony whistleblower leaked Trump's taxes to the New York Times, if you recall. But we can't get Oswald's taxes from the IRS. I mean, think about the president of the United States' taxes were leaked to the New York Times, but we still can't get Lee Harvey Oswald's taxes from the IRS, nor, more importantly, or maybe not as important, the taxes of Michael and Ruth Paine, two innocent American civilians who have had their taxes sealed by the IRS since 1963, going back retroactively even to the 1959-58. I'm not really sure how far back it goes on the Paines. And what is in there? Obviously, only one thing. Every rational person knows it. It's a monetary statement, paid a paycheck from the intelligence agencies.
No, Mark,
your tax return.
No, absolutely.
Return.
It says TBSD. That's all it says, I promise.
Yeah, I mean, what else could be in your tax returns from the IRS that have been sealed for 60 years, other than you declaring on your taxes that you were paid by an intelligence service of the United States government, and you declared it? I mean, it's kind of open and shut. What I'm trying to say is, hopefully it's not just the National Archives releasing files, that other agencies will be forced to cough up files that they haven't been forced to cough up before.
Well, his order seems to be pretty wide open. So I think technically Congress or whomever could demand it based on that order that the rest be released.
Let me just intersect this one for 1 second about, we talked about this last week about advising people to go to locals to watch it commercial free. You know, people don't all watch it live, and people just shoot themselves in the head, apparently, if there's too many commercials. I'm just trying to tell you again for the 50th time, go to unstructured.locals.com right now, you fatso who's coming here 3 days late to watch this show. That's for you. Unstructured.locals.com. No commercials, Harry. Get off the couch and push the button. Okay, let me just get back to the files, because there's Steve Cohen from Tennessee, and what's his name? The other Tennessee congressman, Tim, what's his face, wrote a letter with a third guy to have, Oliver Stone posted this as well. These three congressmen have posted a letter, two Republicans, one Democrat. Steve Cohen, completely deranged Memphis representative, complete Trump derangement syndrome. He's a Democrat, wants to be on a panel that would look through the documents, Eric, to make sure they should be released, right? Tim Burkett, I think the guy's name is Burkett, not good guy down there, wears a John Deere hat a lot and Carhartt jackets. But the other guy, Steve Cohen, is mentally insane. And he, I believe, wants to get in there to see if there's any LBJ stuff. And he's going to try to head that off of the pass. And this was Oliver Stone's good-natured attempt to have these three politicians on a panel to weed out, or, again, what are they weeding out, Eric? What would be the weeding of these three politicians? Well, it would have to be self-interested stuff. The other guys also from Tennessee, I believe, might be interested in the Martin Luther King stuff. Actually, and rightfully so, right? Mm-hmm. But Steve Cohen is a Trump derangement syndrome victim, and he cannot be allowed anywhere near these files. Not now, not in the future, not in some other planetary orbit, because this guy is dangerous, Eric. Now, that being said, we did the unstructured. We're talking about the files. We'll have more on the files on Friday. As Eric and I have said, they're not coming out tomorrow. Let me explain this, because there's so much confusion. It's not confusing to me or to my to my friends, because we've been doing this a long time. What Trump said to the head of DNI, which we don't have, who was just fired, we don't have a head of DNI, and Tulsi Gabbard will be on
time of it
on Thursday, Eric, which will be Thursday. So that DNI may or may not become the head of DNI. We don't know. But even if she does become the head of DNI, she's, according to Trump, has 15 days from last week to put together a plan to release the files. A plan, not the release of the files. Let me say it again. A plan to release the files. Have you looked at the files yet, Mark? No, it's a plan to release the files. So as Eric has pointed out, and I have pointed out, it could take months and months and months to get to the files themselves. What Oliver Stone is trying to do is set up another intergovernment agency like the Assassination Record Review Board, which had a beginning, middle, and end. In other words, I think it had a multi-year lifespan. It knew what year it was going to end and reviewed the different files. I don't think that's necessary anymore.
Why?
Yeah, I know.
What do you need that for? That's just another thing to obstruct.
Yep. It's just another buffer,
more
Senator.
Tax-paying deal.
Right. As they said in The Godfather, it's just another buffer, Senator, and we don't need that. And I think that's where someone as disingenuous as Steve Cohen would insert himself to do mischief and to weed out anything, in my humble opinion, on LBJ. So that being said, we have not gotten into the Marina Oswald thing, and I want to do the women of JFK, a few of them. I want to do Marguerite Oswald, his mother, next. I want to do some Murrett women next. For the women viewers out there, I want to do a bunch, or get to the women of the JFK assassination and put together, because we've done Ruth Paine, which is fine, and we did Michael Paine, but there are other women involved in the assassination and the lore surrounding it, especially his wife, especially his mother, which will be the next two up there. The mother is fascinating, and the Marina is absolutely fascinating. And we're going to get into that now and try to squeeze this all in, because it's such a long, complicated story, Eric.
But not Dorothy Kilgallen.
She's not involved, has nothing to do with it. That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you, there'll be no episode on Judith Ferry Baker, the girl who wrote a book that was a novel that became a nonfiction book out of Amsterdam, a professional spook. And maybe she'll marry James Files in prison, which would be the two of them together could have like a prison Menendez marriage. But yeah, now this is a serious operation. We try to deal with serious stuff here, and we don't really have time to explore stuff that myself and the legitimate researchers feel are legitimate, because there's enough meat on the bone of the real stuff to prevent us from wasting time barking after car tires, which is what the deep state would like us to do. The deep state would like us to spend months and months and months on James Files. The deep state would like us to make Judith Ferry Baker a national heroine and put her on the map. That's not the bait we're taking here. We know exactly who these people are, and I'm not alone. Independently, people have come to the same conclusion I have. That doesn't mean you have to believe me. If you want to believe her, enjoy that rabbit hole, my friend. Just go down and have a good time. But we can't do your bidding for you. We can't go in and say, show me why it's not true. It's a waste of time. It's Holocaust denial type journalism, and that's not what we're about. But we are about Marina Oswald today. And Marina Oswald is, if you think Lee Oswald is an enigma, she's a bigger enigma than him, Eric, because the closest I could come to explaining this is the Spielberg series, The Americans, where the husband and wife team come to the United States as spies. And I'll tell you something. I was telling someone this story last night when I wrote my Oswald miniseries. The producer of The Americans called me up, and he was a friend of he was the brother of an ex-agent of mine. And he said, Spielberg is interested in your miniseries. Can you send it over? He'd like to read it. So I said, of course. I sent it over, and he read it. And I called him back, and I said, what do you think? And he said, yeah, he found it very interesting. I said, would he be interested in making that? And the guy just laughed, and he said, are you kidding? He wouldn't touch something that controversial with a 50-foot pole. What he wanted to see was what the competition was like out there. And I went, oh, I get it. I get it. So he was honest, the producer of The Americans. But the reason and it's a good series, and it's basically fictional, but in reality, I think the reverse happened here. I think that both of them are agents, and both of them had to deal with being agents in the United States. And the reason I mention that, just to give you a little bit of background, there were 13 phony defectors within a 3-year period to the Soviet Union. They went to various countries. It's a program run by James Angleton, mostly military, but there were a couple of other guys who weren't even military. And they would return, and this happened, if you read the FBI reports, it happened about 36 times, 30 times where they brought back Soviet wives. Now, the Soviets are not really interested in releasing their beautiful women to the American public and to the United States with a visa simply to be polite. They released these women to go with these phony defectors so they could get back here, get divorced, as has been written in CIA documents. When they came back to the United States with their new husbands, they would get into domestic disputes with them, some of them physical, some of them quite violent, end up separating from them and getting divorced, and then being able to operate freely throughout the United States. Angleton and the CIA and ONI advised these guys that this is not going to happen any longer. If you come back with a Soviet wife, you're stuck with her. And I believe this is what happened with Oswald and Marina. He was stuck with her, and she was stuck with him. And she was desperately trying to separate herself so she could do intelligence work, which is what her job was. She was caught sending magazines back to the Soviet Union. I don't mean Life magazine. I mean Scientific American, science magazines that we took for granted, but they didn't have access to in the Soviet Union, Eric. You know what I mean? Like the more tech magazines that we have here.
We covered one of them. I forgot his name. It slipped my mind. The other guy who was...
there's Robert Webster, and there's also James Mittenbrow. There were two of them that she actually had their numbers, their addresses in her address book. She may have interfaced with Webster and the other guy, James Mittenbrow. Both of them returned to the United States, by the way. Both of them were phony defectors. Oswald was a phony defector, I believe, for ONI. Some people say CIA. I think the CIA had a file on him, but he was really ONI. And when ONI had to testify before the House Assassinations Committee in 1977, they stood up and said, we have no files on Lee Harvey Oswald. And they said, what happened to them? And they said, smilingly, we destroyed them all last night. Braggingly to their face, like, go F yourselves. I was the head of ONI. Nevertheless, when Oswald defects, he goes over there and he's working in a radio factory and he's banging broads left and right. And he believes it's because of his sexual prowess. But in reality, they're putting honeypots on him. They're throwing honeypots at him. Various girls are potential Marina Oswalds. And we could eventually we'll go through all of them, but I think we've covered them mostly in other episodes. Marina is the last one, and she's the one that sticks. And how does she get to Minsk? This is where we're going to go back now in time to 1941, and this is when she is born in Moldavia, in a town called Archangel, of all names. And she is her father is gone. She doesn't know anything about her father. And her mother is named Klavdia. And Klavdia is not the greatest mother in the world. She immediately leaves her, goes off to another town and leaves her with aunts and uncles in Molotovsk. this town in Moldavia, and this is her. This is the earliest known photo of Marina Oswald. I don't know if she's 16 or 18 here, but she will be on her own at 15, and I'll get to that in a second. Her mother doesn't explain what happened to her father, and I have found out what happened to her father. Her father was named Nikolai Didenko, Didenko. Nicholas Didenko was killed by the Soviets during the war for being a traitor, a coward. He was executed, as many were fleeing the battle, Eric. Probably in the Stalingrad battle, he was executed for being a traitor. I don't mean a spy. I mean, someone who was executed for not fighting up to their heroic abilities as a Soviet army. But she's born as Marina Nikolayevna Prusakova. Now Nikolayevna is Nikolayevna is because of him. That's his paternal name that she is given as Nikolai, and that's how. And then Prusakova is the mother's maiden name. So she's got these two names, and the mother in 1952 will remarry. She marries a guy named Alexander Medvedev, just like the guy who works under Putin. And I've for years tried to find if they're related, and I've been unable to find a connection between the two. Spelled the same way. He's an electrical engineer. He was also in the war. They moved to Leningrad. Leningrad, which was Stalingrad, is being rebuilt from the ground up. There's a lot of work. You can't get an apartment. But he, with the mother, comes back and bribes different people, and they get an apartment there. And his mother lives there too. It's one of these Soviet things where everybody's living in one apartment, Eric. He's got kids. He's got a wife, a mother. And Marina's there now with her mother living in this guy's apartment, which is really his mother's apartment in Leningrad. So she's his stepdad. She believes that he's her dad. And because he has been away, and she thinks that he's been gone for the war. Keep in mind, it's 1952. So the war's been over, what, 7 years now? You know what I mean? So she is 52. She's born in 41. She's 11 years old, right? So the mother is someone who's focused completely on the happiness of Alexander, her new husband, and vice versa. He's an alcoholic. He beats Marina repeatedly. He doesn't like her. It's not his blood. I mean, it's one of those stepfather stories where you're not my kid. We don't have enough food here. Like, why am I feeding you? The mother, any sign of affection to her, Alexander's mother hates Marina because she's absolutely no blood to them. You know what I mean? Like, she has no connection. They don't even like the wife that he married, who's her mother, Claudia. They hate her too. I mean, there's a lot of hate going on.
Happy times.
Happy post-war times. Stalin ruling with an iron fist, soon to be Khrushchev. But nevertheless, these people love Stalin and they love repression. I think, sometimes people model themselves after Trump. A lot of people model themselves after Stalin, and I mean that in a bad way, not in a good way. But anyway, so the mother gets cancer and slowly dies over a 2 or 3 year period, sadly. Marina enrolls in pharmacy college to become a pharmacist. And the mother does slowly die of cancer. And she actually misses the day that her mother dies in the hospice by a couple of hours because she was busy going to the movies or some stupid thing, which she beats up on herself for years. In 1959, she graduates from the pharmaceutical college, and now she's living with an abusive stepfather, Eric, who has no mother as a buffer, and his family. And they're sitting down eating, and he says, well, he's saying this obviously in Russian, but he's saying, well, we have no connection to you any longer. Good luck. And she goes, where am I supposed to go? I'm 15. And he goes, I don't know, but you can't stay here. And just like that, she's put out into the mega city of Leningrad as a 15-year-old girl. And she's got to fend. Yeah, no, it's brutal. Really is brutal. And she's got to fend for herself. She does this by conducting tours, trying to help people take photographs. She does some nefarious, according to sources, some sex work. I mean, there's various things that she's involved in.
Kind of tougher runaway. So, I mean,
it's kind of a
everything.
runaway. She's not a runaway. She's a kick out away. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. She's not running away. She wanted to stay there, simply out of just the pure fact of not having a place to live. I mean, I'm sure the winter was brutal. Anyway, so there's an aunt and uncle in Minsk, and Minsk is the place where she is sent. This is the aunt and uncle here. That's Ilya on the left and Valia in the center. Ilya is the lieutenant colonel in the MDV, which is their FBI, a domestic. It's not the KGB, which would be CIA. He is a lieutenant colonel in the equivalent of their FBI. And she moves in with them, and they are blood, so it's not that bizarre. But she is supposed to be,
That's her mother's brother, then?
It's a little vague as to who's who. I'll tell you that. I was never really.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's definitely not her mother's brother, but it's something like that, something close by. But yeah, so we got into this with the Kennedys last week. So she goes to like a pharmacy warehouse as a job, not a pharmacy, a warehouse, like it would be the Amazon warehouse of pharmacies. And she quits after one day and goes to some summer retreat for the rest of the summer. It's kind of vague what she's doing there. She goes for months on a holiday after quitting this job. I believe that's where she was getting intelligence training at that time in 1959. 1961, later, she'll be dealing with Oswald, who's not here yet. But I believe she quits her pharmacy job and begins to get training. There's no explanation as to how she survives. She takes another month-long holiday in 1960 at a rest home in Leningrad. She, like I said, she quits after one day. And then she goes to this dance when they had one of these union hall dances. And at the dance, she wears this red dress. She looks like Brigitte Bardot. According to everyone there, she had like a Brigitte Bardot hairdo on. And she shows up, and one person after another asks her to dance with her. And one of them is Lee Harvey Oswald as Halleck Heidel, who's working in the radio factory. Oswald's already been in Minsk for a number of months now. He's had a number of girlfriends, a number of affairs. Ella Gorman and others have dropped him. And this is who he runs into. This is actually from their wedding photo. But he becomes enthralled with Marina. She believes, based on his accent, that he is not from Russia, but one of the Soviet states, one of the Baltic states, maybe Bulgaria, maybe Romania, because his Russian is that good. His Russian is that good that she believes he's a fluent Russian speaker, but with an accent from another country. And she has no idea that he's an American. She's later informed that he's an American. A bunch of the girls dropped him because they were just filing intelligence reports on him. You know what I mean? And he would ask them to marry him and trying to get intelligence out of them. I mean, he's got a crew, including Ernst Titovit, the doctor who became my friend, who wrote a book on being his wingman. Titovit, another KGB operative. There's Pavlov, Golubalev, I believe, who was his friend, whose father was a Soviet war hero. He's got this whole crew. Yeah, there's Titovit. This guy kills me. We later became friends in the late 90s. He's still alive. He wrote a great book on Oswald. I forget the name of it, but it's basically I was Oswald's wingman, and how they're going around hooking up with girls in Minsk. But he's also obviously, everyone around these people is an operative. And that's why it's so hard. Yeah, there's Golubachev, I think, who was this? Was that early Titovit?
Yeah.
There's a shot. I don't know if there's a photo of Oswald with his crew at the radio. I think you may see that he's got a good crew there.
Yeah, he had fun times here.
Yeah.
The party. It looks like an album cover, does it not?
Yeah. This is like the bad Beatles of Hamburg, when they were before they were famous. Yeah. This is him and his gang. So he's not a loner, and he's not a lone nut, and he's not that introverted. He is a guy on a mission. He's gathering intelligence. He puts together this entire detailed account of how the radio factory works. He puts together a detailed account of his historic diary on how the bus system works, how the TVs work, how the radio works, how the supermarket works, because we need the same intelligence that Marina is going to need from us to send back to them. Although our society is much more open, she is more interested in sending back literature and reports out of Fort Worth and out of Dallas later, and burrowing into the white Russian scene in Dallas. There's a anti-communist white Russian group of spook adjacent geologists and oil men that she will burrow into, Marina. Now, they've got families back in the Soviet Union. They're quite vulnerable, and that's a separate operation, what's going on. And that'll include George and Jean de Mohrenschildt, Eric, who will later befriend the two of them and bring them into the scene. George de Mohrenschildt will become the person assigned by J. Walton Moore of the CIA of Dallas to hook up with Lee Harvey Oswald and find out what he knows. This is Moore and de Mohrenschildt had an office in the same building, and Moore assigned de Mohrenschildt to be the handler.
And we have a whole episode on George de Mohrenschildt if anyone wants to check it out.
If you want to find out about George Mohrenschildt, fascinating character. I don't have time to get into him today. And him and his wife became friends with Oswald and his wife. But getting back to Minsk, Oswald wants to leave the Soviet Union, and he starts to begin to sell America to her. And she thinks that he's kidding around, like he's there, he's got a job, he's got an incredible apartment. He's making more money than the manager of the goddamn radio factory. She's pregnant with June. That's June right there. This might be as they were getting their passport photos or something, but June will be born after their wedding. Now, keep in mind, they date while Oswald is in the hospital having a mastoid ear operation. He goes into a Soviet hospital, has an operation on his ear, mastoid surgery, and while he's in bed for weeks, she comes every single day bringing Easter goodies like Easter eggs on Easter Sunday, jellies, fruits, meatloaf, flanken, gefilte fish, whatever the hell she brought. Why a girl who looks like her would be doing this for a schnook like him makes no sense. I mean, he is up against that's the aunt right there, and that's the newborn baby June. She's living with the aunt and uncle, the Soviet intelligence operative and lieutenant colonel, and he's got this plush apartment overlooking the river with a balcony. And he takes her to the apartment, as he's done other girls, and says, "Hey, look, I mean, when you're 22 years old and you've got your own place, Eric, whether it's in Minsk or Manhattan."
Well, especially there, because they're so communally living.
Yeah.
The idea of having a place of your own is was probably a pretty big deal.
Well, she says to her girlfriend, she said, "I always wondered who lived in that building." And, not him, but I'm just saying, because it was such a luxurious building overlooking the river. So she goes and visits him quite often. He takes her out, a number of times. And he asks her to marry him while he's in bed after the operation, which is kind of interesting. And they become fiance and engaged. And after that, he goes back to Moscow, to the American embassy in Moscow, to see McVicker, the ambassador who he had railed against a number of years before, denouncing the United States. And now he's got his tail between his legs, but it's kind of a setup anyway, to get back his passport. And he tells her not to say that she's pregnant. He wants to get her a passport and visa from the Soviets and a passport to go to the United States. So she doesn't have a birth certificate. So they now have to come up, because Why would she have a birth certificate? They start making one up out of the blue, kind of like Obama, and she gives birth to June and February. But the information on the birth certificate doesn't match her storyline. Let me put it that way. There's another city involved. There's a blank there for the father. It becomes a problematic. She's a member of the Komissar, which is the Soviet Young Communist League. And she's a dues-paying member of the Komissar, which would be the equivalent of the Hitler Youth. And she lies about it to American officials in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow because they say, "Are you a member of the Communist Party?" And she lies. And whether she does that to get into the United States or whatever, it will later be used against her in Dallas after the assassination. That lie itself is used to threaten to deport her or jail her for lying on American forms to get a passport. She says that she was not a member of the Commissar. She was. Whether she was into it or not is debatable. I mean, it's kind of silly because she's being trained as an intelligence operative, and her uncle is one of the heads of intelligence. I mean, it's like your uncle's J. Edgar Hoover, for Christ's sakes. I mean, it's just a ridiculous argument.
She kind of had to be. I mean,
They
didn't a
had
lot
to be.
of them?
Yeah, and he blesses the wedding. He blesses the marriage. Why you would bless it to a guy who's an American defector, now a redefector? I mean, it would be the worst nightmare for any real Soviet communist parent of the Politburo, of which the uncle is a member. The uncle's a big wig communist and has a big wig apartment and big wig food and everything else. Why he would bless this it is insane, other than she's on a mission herself, Eric, which is true. So she's going to go back with him. They go back to the embassy. She's pregnant. They get the visa from the Soviets. Her friends kind of taunt her for doing this. She says, "I didn't know he was an American. I didn't do it for that." But nevertheless, it's an assignment, and she takes the assignment to go back with this guy to the United States. I mean, think about the heroism or the courage you have to have for a 21-year-old girl who's now got a child, 22-year-old girl with a child, to go to the United States for the first time on a mission for your country, Eric. Even without the mission, just to pick up and leave, marry this guy and go to the United States. So, okay, what do? They get on a train, they go and get on a ship and go to the United States, to New York. And they're met by someone from the State Department. He has to borrow money from the embassy in Moscow, which they gladly loan him a ton of money by our standards today to a to a defector who would denounce the United States. Of course, you don't debrief him when he comes back. Why would you debrief him? That would be insane, right? It's only the height of the Cold War. He doesn't even get debriefed, but he does go to Rotterdam. And as I said in previous episodes, there's a safe house in Rotterdam where he is debriefed. And this is also in my Oswald miniseries. If anybody wants to follow that on Locals, if you become a paid member, you can read about the details of the debriefing in Moscow, in Rotterdam. She goes shopping in Rotterdam. She is so enamored by the little Dutch houses and how bright it is and the flowers and everything, and how she had come from such Soviet darkness, Eric, into Holland. She said that enough blew her mind. How there was food everywhere, there was fruit everywhere, there were tulips everywhere. They had a spotless apartment that was given to them for the State Department says one night. She claims it was 3 nights. And you begin to get a difference of opinion on stories from Marina than the official story right in the transportation coming back from the Soviet Union to the United States. She's examined by a doctor in the embassy. This is in Moscow, a guy named Patterson. And Patterson tells them that his mother lives in Atlanta. And he says, if you're ever in Atlanta, please stop in and see my mother. Well, wouldn't you know it, they land in New York, and the first stop they go to is Atlanta. And Oswald has 7 suitcases when he lands in the United States. And when he leaves Atlanta, he's got 5. That's odd. So apparently they dropped off 2 suitcases to this guy, this O&I official's mother. and Atlanta, and then went on their way to Fort Worth. But when they were in Rotterdam, they were debriefed by, I believe, two O&I guys who gave him a lie detector test and maybe sodium pentothal, and he handed over the historic diary and his details about the radio factory to them. That's why there was no one to meet him in New York, other than this guy Spaz, who was a State Department greeter of foreign people. He didn't actually work for the State Department, but I think they wanted to keep it extremely low profile because I think they felt the Soviets were watching through her as to what was going to happen. So they couldn't meet him. They took her out shopping while they debriefed Oswald, by the way, in case anybody's curious about that. And then she comes back, she bought some shit, and the baby's keeping her busy. They get on a plane and they fly to New York. They're in a hotel. She says it's 3 nights. They said it was no nights. Again, these stories from her are completely different than the official story. They then fly to Fort Worth, where they meet Robert Oswald, and they go to stay in his house, Robert and his wife, Veda, in Fort Worth, Texas. And that's where you see the beginning of her life with her baby and becoming an American. That happens, and they're not there too long, but Marina is taken around by Veda. She's gotten a new hairdo, a new dress. What else can I tell you about it?
There's Robert, by the way.
There's Robert, who is also an ex-Marine, not unlike his brother. He's not estranged from his brother. There are times when Lee will write him phony letters almost that he didn't even believe. In other words, he would write him a letter saying, "Go fuck yourself," out of the blue. And he'd go, "What the hell is this?" You know what I mean? Like, it was almost like for the Soviet people the Soviet intelligence people to intercept. He'd write these letters saying, "I now love the Soviet Union. America is dead to me. I don't give a shit about America. You're capitalist. You're a weasel." And his brother would go, "Who the hell wrote this?" You know, like he goes, "This isn't my little brother." What? I mean, you could tell who your brother is. You know what I mean? Like, receiving a letter like that is kind of, you really don't believe it. And I don't think he really believed it either. But anyway, he takes them in. They watch baseball. They watch football. They have Thanksgiving together. Detroit versus, I want to say Lions versus Packers. John Pick shows up. That's the half brother with the shades over there. That's Robert in the foreground, Lee in the background, Marina on the upper right. Robert has a 8mm movie camera. He shoots some pretty good color footage of the event for that Thanksgiving. And they do American crap. You know, it's the first time she's been exposed to American Thanksgiving, which is kind of interesting.
Robert's house.
Sorry, I actually have that footage.
Oh yeah, let's take a look. Oh, I didn't know that.
Let me mute that.
Oh wow! Oh yeah, those are his kids. As Veda on the right, or maybe Veda shooting. There's Marina. Yeah, with the new hairdo and the new dress. He's the only one who could speak to her because he's the only one who speaks Russian, and she doesn't speak a word of English. It will be rather difficult to learn English for her, but we're going to find out how she does that in a little while. I just to back up, in 1960, it'll come up. I just wanted to get to the point where she meets our old friend Robert Fitzpatrick at Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama. And in the summer of '63, he will go speak on what it's like, the life in the Soviet Union, for his cousin Eugene Muret. Clay Shaw will also do it right after him or right before him. And I think Joan Baez performed a couple of weeks before Oswald. So Oswald speaks at Spring Hill College in Mobile, which is, of course, a Jesuit
This
school.
is him older. I don't have a younger one.
Yeah, that's Robert Fitzpatrick years later. His son will become Fritz of Fritz and the Tantrums, the rock band. He will become the head of Euro Disney. He will become the head of Johns Hopkins. He will become the youngest Baltimore city councilman in American history. But at this point, he's
Indian Pelosi, right?
Yeah. At this point, he is a student at Spring Hill College along with Eugene Muret, which is Jesuit. So he's also Canadian, by the way. And they gave him United States citizenship. He's not even American. Later comes out of the closet as gay like 5 years ago. Anyway, he's still alive. And Fitzpatrick befriends his assignment, Marina Oswald, while Lee is inside with the boys because it's Jesuit, the women can't go in. So Fitzpatrick, his assignment is to befriend Marina Oswald, and they start talking about opera, and they walk around, they exchange addresses, he mails her some opera records, she mails him some stuff. And you see the beginnings of an intelligence operation between Robert Fitzpatrick and who's doing someone's bidding, and her at this college, this spook training school called Spring Hill, which will train, among other people, Eugene Muret, who will later become the head of the entire court system of Bosnia after the war in Bosnia. He will be selected to redesign the entire Bosnia legal system in the 90s, Eric. Eugene Muret. There he is. There he is years later. This is Oswald's first cousin. But the point of the matter is, while Oswald is speaking on life in the Soviet Union, Robert Fitzpatrick is holding the hand of Marina Oswald and speaking to her in Russian, of course. Everybody who's an operative in the United States who speaks Russian is an operative. In other words, every single person who is involved in the Russian language is not doing it for fun. It's not.
You mean
French.
It's not like Spanish at your high school?
That's what I mean. It's not French where you want to read French novels. It's being done for intelligence purposes, and that's across the board. Engineers and scientists want to be able to read Soviet scientific papers for the intelligence agencies. If you're an operative for the CIA, you can't really take a Soviet nuclear plan and read it. You got to find an engineer, teach him to read Russian so he can report back as, and I'm just making this up, the status of the hydrogen bomb.
Or know what the hell they're saying, because
that's what I mean.
You might, you might know the language, but a scientist can understand what the hell is talking about.
Right. Just because you speak Russian doesn't mean you know anything about the hydrogen bomb.
Right.
Anyway, the point of the matter is everybody involved in Russian, and that includes Oswald going back to the Monterey Language School up in Big Sur, California, where he was sent when he was at Camp Pendleton. He went up to the Monterey Language School to learn Russian in an advanced lightning style that they have for intelligence operatives. It's not just Russian, they had different languages, but the primary one at that time that they wanted to get everyone to learn later became Arabic, by the way. You know, in the 2000, after 9/11, it became Arabic at the Monterey Language School. Pashtun.
Yeah. And there's three of them, but Iranians speak
a different
language. There's like,
interestingly enough, another woman will go there in order to learn Russian years later, and that's Barack Hussein Obama's mother. She will meet the guy from Africa, who is his father, who's also there learning Russian, oddly enough, because he's supposed to go back to Kenya and become the president of Kenya. He was an alcoholic, crashed his car into a tree and died, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, so the language thing, everybody involved in the language is an intelligence operative. So you got this group of white Russians. There she is with her little baby boy, a little anchor baby, little birthright citizenship baby. There's a group in Dallas who are geologists, they're oil men, they're former white Russians who have come to the United States with the help of the CIA after the revolution. And they've been in Dallas doing geological stuff, doing oil stuff, doing stuff like that for a number of years. And this includes Peter Gregory, George Boohy, Paul Gregory, his son, George de Mohrenschildt is part of this group. That's the guy with the glasses and the mustache is Peter Gregory. He is a white Russian in Dallas. On the left is his wife, I believe her name was Elizabeth, and on the right is George Boohy. Now, George Boohy was a descendant of Russian aristocracy. These are the guys who were the descendants of the czars, Eric. These are all the descendants of the royal family who got out before they got the Tsar Nicholas treatment, if you know what I mean. And they were handled by OSS and CIA, and we're now doing our bidding. So these guys are in Dallas, these white Russians, and all they want to do is meet Marina Oswald and Lee Oswald, but mostly Marina Oswald because she is a Soviet citizen. They know that she's an intelligence operative, and they're assigned to pick her brain. And how does she get into that world? She gets into that world through George de Mohrenschildt, who says, I want you to come to a party and meet all these wonderful Russian-speaking American citizens who are from Russia, have been here for a number of years. They love to meet you. They've heard all about you. Well, it turns out to be like the party at Rosemary's Baby, if you remember that party scene on Central Park West, where they're all milling around her, talking to her, like, what's it like now? What happened to this guy? And they're all picking her brain for intelligence information. And she's hip to this, so she's being coy with them. She's trying to pick their brain about what they know, and they're picking her brain. Now, she's living in poverty with Oswald, so they say, well, we could give you a baby carriage. We can get you dresses. We can give you money. So Lee Oswald is saying, no, go fuck yourself. I don't want anybody helping us. We'll do it ourselves, thank you. And I don't think it's really about pride economically. I think he doesn't want them in his world. That's really what it's about, because they're all spooks. In fact, Paul Gregory has a new book out, by the way, his son. Paul Gregory, who's got the new book out, will go to Marina for Russian lessons. This is another thing that the intelligence people do. They're all trying to get better at the language. This was Ruth Payne's angle. This is Paul Gregory's angle. Paul Gregory is the son of Peter Gregory. What does Peter Gregory do? That guy teaches Russian language at the U.S. military base. Isn't that convenient? So the son, who should be pretty good at speaking Russian, needs to take lessons for money from Marina Oswald. Literally shows up at their house once a week to take lessons from Marina Oswald on Russian, which is interesting. Peter Gregory, we will find out, who just knows her socially, is assigned to be her interpreter by the Warren Commission. And he misinterprets her statements intentionally, Eric. Why do we know that? Because since then, other Russians have translated what she said. And you can see the difference in the transcripts. And this guy is working for the deep state, this guy, Peter Gregory. Anyway, that's just part of the crew that she's involved in here. So they take her, this is unbelievable. They take her to a pool party with Oswald. And where is the pool party? It's at a guy's house named Admiral Bruton. Admiral Henry C. Bruton. We're going to get back to him in a little while, but you will see how Henry Bruton, the admiral, figures into this story. Because whatever you think you know about Marina Oswald, forget it. This is another world that she's involved in here. She is involved in all these different things as a wife and as a mother and doing things. She is approached, and we're gonna get to this guy. I just wanted to put him up there right now. We're gonna get to him in a little while, but she's approached at this party. George de Mohrenschildt has to leave the country. Where does George de Mohrenschildt have to go? He's got to go to Haiti, and he's got another assignment. Now, he has to hand off the Oswalds, and he hands off the Oswalds to Michael Payne and Ruth Payne, our old friends. Michael Payne, obviously working with a high-level security clearance at Bell Helicopter, and Ruth Paine, his wife, Michael Paine going back to his family, going all the way back to the Forbes, multi-millions of dollars. Paine signed the Declaration of Independence, old money, deep state money, deep state duo doing intelligence stuff. He goes on meetings of the ACLU and right-wing groups with Oswald, Michael Paine. The two, his father's a famous Trotskyite. He was labeled as a security threat. His father, as a communist, Michael Paine's father, back east. They're both from back east. Why they're living in the middle of Dallas is because of these Dallas white Russians and this white Russian community. It's like a nerve center there. Marina is going there because she's going to infiltrate this white Russian community, in my humble opinion. So Michael Paine is assigned to deal with Lee Harvey Oswald. And they talk about socialism, they talk about Marxism, they talk about Trotsky, they talk about the Soviet Union. They then go to different meetings. They go to a speech by Edwin Walker, the General Walker, who we did an episode on. They go to ACLU meetings, left and right. They go to both. Here's the Walker. They go to a speech that Walker gave in Dallas. Anyway, pretty soon, Michael Paine breaks up with his wife. Ta-da! She is separated from him, and she's got 2 kids. And pretty soon, Marina Oswald breaks up with Lee. Ta-da! And she's got 2 kids. Out of the blue. So Marina is asked to move in with Ruth Paine and live with her while she's pregnant with Rachel, by the way. She already has June, and she's got the new one on the way. She's just about to give birth to the new one. And part of the come on, here's the 2. They could have been lovers. We're not really sure. A lot of people, including William Manchester, who wrote Death of a President, who was kind of a mainstream media guy, handpicked by Jackie Onassis, says they were lovers. Hugh Ainsworth says they were lovers. Not just me. There's plenty of people who believe that they had a sex relationship. There are the love letters that I've discussed back and forth. And of course, famously, I think it was Decker, the sheriff, who seized Ruth Paine's projection device and her lesbian films the day of the assassination, took him over to the police station, and the policeman joyfully watched the lesbian films of Ruth Paine. She will then demand that they be returned via the Warren Commission. These were commercial films, not films of her doing things. This is Ruth Paine's garage, where supposedly the rifle was kept. 2 different Minox cameras, one belonging to Michael Paine, one belonging to Lee Harvey Oswald. The Oswald camera has, at military installation, photos of Minsk on it. And the Michael Paine one, we don't know what was on it. But the Paines had a 3x5 index card catalog metal casing system in that garage of 3x5 cards in metal filing cabinets on all the different left-wing activists in the Dallas area, the pro-Castro movement, college kids who were pro-Castro. They had their own research from previous assignments in that garage, allegedly Michael and Ruth Paine. He is somewhere else now. They eventually get divorced, but they stay together their whole lives in Northern California. They literally are sewn together at the hip. And why not? Even while they're separated, he's given her $600 a week just for play money. And they have a beautiful house. And she writes these letters to Marina, sometimes 4, 5, 6 letters a week, Eric, expressing how she's got to move in with her. She loves her. We have to get together. You have to teach me Russian. I can help the children. And one of the documents I just found, interestingly enough, Marina expresses to her how she's sexually frustrated. And Ruth Paine says, after you give birth, we're going to go to Planned Parenthood because they have a course for women on sexual frustration. You can't make this up. That's kind of new for me. That was a new one. I found that. But anyway, who knows with these two women? The point of the matter is, many spies are bisexual. They have to be for infiltration purposes. Oswald himself was filmed doing things with allegedly with a another KGB officer in Moscow or in Minsk. It's used for blackmail. We see it here in our own country, right, Eric? I mean, it's still used as a device today. But anyway, she is fighting with Oswald all the time. And what she's trying to do is break away from him. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, she's attempting through phony domestic arguments and physical altercations to separate herself from him without calling attention to her. Now, James Hosty and the FBI are all over Marina, and rightfully so, Eric. She's a Soviet defector, in essence, right? I mean, she's come over, right? She's married an American. She's a defector without defecting, but in essence, she is. So of course they're keeping tabs on her, and he's telling them to get away from her. Well, it's kind of bizarre because Hosty is just doing his job. It's not about Oswald; it's about her. That's what people misunderstand about the assassination. The FBI is not up his ass. They're up his ass and up her ass because she's a Soviet agent. And they're keeping an eye on her, and is Ruth Paine, obviously. Ruth Paine is holding her hand and doing everything so she can't get 1 inch away from Ruth Paine. And Ruth Paine doesn't want Oswald to come over there, but he comes over on the weekends, famously with Buell Wesley Frazier, and he would stay over on the weekends while staying in a rooming house in Oak Cliff. That being said, there's supposedly the whole scuttlebutt about the rifle and everything else, and we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. But the reality of it is, the day, a couple of weeks before the assassination, this guy's sister, this is Buell Wesley Frazier. This guy's sister, Lenny Mae Randall, goes to Ruth and tells Ruth Paine there's a job opening at the Texas School Book Depository. This comes from Lenny Mae Randall. Lenny Mae Randall will later say, along with her brother, that Oswald got into the back of her brother's car with a long package, aka a rifle. Here's Lenny Mae Randall. She will lie under oath to the FBI with her brother to save her brother's ass, who was being threatened with the electric chair and arrested twice for the killing of JFK. The brother will be given 2 lie detector tests and intimidated into turning against Oswald with the curtain rod story. The only connection he has towards curtain rods is the fact that he worked in a department store in the summer in high school and shipped out curtain rods, which is where the curtain rod story actually comes from. As Marina famously said, the Ruth Paines didn't have curtains, they had Venetian blinds. So that was a kind of interesting tidbit from Marina Oswald. Marina Oswald will muddy the waters of all these investigations. She will intentionally muddy every investigation from the beginning, from the original Warren Commission to the House Assassinations Committee to her testimony in the Clay Shore trial. She will constantly contradict herself. This is intentional as an intelligence operative. And she's confronted by various Warren Commission investigators who privately say in their notes, this woman has been lying through her teeth since day one. This is what, despite what Earl Warren says to her being this sweet little late girl, and he's like her grandfather, and he's treating her like she's his granddaughter. And behind the scenes, Rankin and the other Warren Commission investigators know that she's a lying cunt, according to them, Eric, according to them. And they don't believe a word she's saying. I will tell you, this is intentional. We're going to get into it right now. She is with Ruth Paine. He's going to work at the Texas School Book Depository and coming over on the weekends. He's living out in Oak Cliff. He's staying for the weekends. And that's the structure of their relationship. He is trying to get her to leave Ruth Paine's house and move into the new apartment that he's gotten for them. That will run out of time on November 22nd, 1963, when he goes to work. He shows up that Thursday, the 21st, the night before in question, and the Warren Commission says it's to get his rifle, which is in Ruth Paine's garage. Highly, highly debated scenario. She goes out there and touches this blanket. She feels there's something in it and is relieved that there's something in the blanket. And when the police show up the next day, they pick up the blanket and the blanket is empty, the Dallas police. And the night before, it was filled with metal rods. Michael Payne said he thought it was camping equipment. The Carcano that they're describing is also featured in these photos that Marina took of her husband, the famous pistol, rifle, Marxist magazines photo in back of their house. She claims she only snapped one photo. These photos have clearly been doctored, and I'll give you a great little story about the doctoring of the photos. The famous photo of Oswald with the rifle and the pistol ends up in the hands of the Associated Press. And the day of the assassination, the New York Times runs it. Newsweek runs the same photo, and Detroit Free Press runs the same photo. Well, in the photo, there is mysteriously a telescopic scope in the photos in the front page of the New York Times. Mark Lane, who represents Marguerite Oswald, writes a letter to the Warren Commission saying, have you seen these photos in the New York Times, Newsweek, Time Magazine, the Associated Press, and the Detroit Free News of the rifle? And in fact, the rifle in the newspapers and magazines has a scope on it. That rifle has no scope. How did it get a scope from the same photos, Eric? They write a letter, the Warren Commission, to the New York Times. New York Times has to confess that they doctored the photos, that they all point the finger saying, we didn't get it. We got it from the Associated Press. Associated Press, there's the scope there. But that's not the photo of the backyard rifle. It has no scope. The New York Times is forced to admit in one of the most embarrassing moments in New York Times history to the Warren Commission in writing that they doctored the photo of the rifle to put a scope on it. And this went to the Associated Press, it went to Newsweek, it went to all the different publications. And this was in the backyard is where this was shot. Oswald says it was doctored. There are 3 or 4 copies floating around. One says, ha, 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 killer of fascists, written in pencil on the back, one of the copies. And that was supposedly given to George de Mohrenschildt, who in 1967 all of a sudden finds his copy of the famous backyard photo. And nobody could trace whose writing that is on the back of the photo. It's not de Mohrenschildt's, it's not Oswald's wife, it's not Marina's. So no one knows how that ha 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 killer of fascists in Cyrillic of all languages is on the back of de Mohrenschildt's copy of the photo. De Mohrenschildt will leave the earth very shortly after being pursued by Bill O'Reilly when he is sent a subpoena to testify in the House Assassinations Committee in 1977 in Palm Beach, not so far from Mar-a-Lago. 1967, Marina Oswald will testify for Clay Shaw for the defense on his behalf that her husband did the killing. From the beginning, and then the shots go off at the Texas School Book Depository. We don't have to get into that, but Marina is home watching this on TV, and Ruth Payne comes back from the dentist, and they get a call from the jail, and it is Lee Oswald. The police show up, they rip through the garage, they go through the blanket, they take everything. And Marina goes down to the jail with the baby, and Marguerite, the mother, shows up with her. Ruth Payne gets 2 phone calls from Oswald. And the first phone call is to get him legal counsel. And he says, I'm trying to reach Marina because I want her to call this lawyer, John Apt, in New York to represent me. John Apt is the William Kunstler of the American Civil Liberties Union. He is the president of the ACLU. And John Apt will remarkably disappear for the weekend to avoid phone calls from Oswald. But nevertheless, Ruth Payne receives 2 phone calls from Oswald, ostensibly to get him legal counsel. And she will later say, how dare him? How dare him ask me to get him legal counsel? And I'm going, holy crap, lady, I didn't know he gave up his constitutional rights. She refuses. She claimed later she was outraged that he asked her to call a lawyer for him. And in fact, he gets no legal counsel for a number of days.
Wow.
Okay, so he's in jail, and obviously he makes the call to North Carolina. We know about that. We know what's going on in the jail cell. He's obviously killed on Sunday by Jack Ruby. And what happens? Where is Marina? Where is Marina? Where is Marguerite? They're taken by this. This is where the story really begins, is right now, because the rest of it we kind of know from the channel and different episodes. She's taken by Secret Service to the inn at Six Flags down in Arlington. And I don't know if you could show some photos of what's Six Flags over Texas is an amusement park. Our friends in Texas will tell you the history of the amusement park. There's some photos. I think you might have some of them to show what this place looked like. Yeah, this is a Six Flags over Texas. It's an amusement park. It actually had like shootouts, and you could dress as a Confederate soldier and put together a regiment. It had a lot of fun things there, Ferris wheels and things of that nature also. But it also had an inn at the Six Flags over Texas. There was an inn, and in that inn, it was a motel complex, Eric. The Secret Service sticks her in there with Marguerite, and they hide her out. Of course, nobody does anything while Oswald's alive for 3 days. They are not treated especially. They're not protected. They're getting death threats for 3 days because Oswald is alive, and she's the wife. There's no protection from the Secret Service. Only after he's dead on Sunday does the Secret Service swoop in and scoop her up to protect her from the American people. The American people are now, their bloodlust has dissipated because Lee Harvey Oswald has been killed by Jack Ruby. They don't care about Marina Oswald. In fact, they will begin to feel quite sorry for Marina Oswald. The Secret Service, who has no jurisdiction to do this, kidnaps her and takes her to the inn at Six Flags over Texas. They are hiding her from the FBI. The FBI wants to interview her, but they can't get to her because the Secret Service is put her on ice so they could build their story with her. Here's the inn portion of Six Flags over Texas. They isolate her in this motel complex away from the FBI. There's nobody looking to kill Marina Oswald. Her husband's dead. In fact, tons of checks start pouring in from the American people. Where do the checks go? They go to the FBI. The FBI is inundated with money from the American people who open up their hearts to this mother with 2 kids who doesn't speak a word of English, who they feel doesn't deserve what she's getting. And she begins to get so much money. She gets $70,000 in donations, the equivalent of $630,000 today, just in checks. Just in checks. This is separate from the rest of the money that's going to come pouring in. This is just $50, $10, $25 checks, Eric. So the FBI doesn't know what to do with this. The Secret Service is hiding her out in this motel complex. And why is the Secret Service hiding her out? Because for the next 2 months, they are going to build her story. Because with the death of Oswald, the only one who can contradict the official narrative is her. She's the only person who could say that didn't happen. She becomes the most important person in the American empire because only she can say that Oswald said A, B, C, D, and E, Eric. Only Oswald said, I'm going to kill General Walker. Only Oswald could say, I'm going to kill Nixon. Only Oswald could say, I'm going to hijack a plane to Cuba. These are all stories that they put into her storyline. How she locked her husband in the bathroom when he was going to kill Nixon one day, who wasn't even anywhere near the Texas, right? So a lot of these stories are put in by the Secret Service and rehearsed with her, with a Russian translator who is one of the Secret Service agents, and this guy, Peter Gregory, who shows up as her deep state translator. It's so sad what they do to her, but she's a captive of the Secret Service. Secret Service has no legal right to do any of this. But where is James Rowley? James Rowley is in D.C., in the Oval Office, sitting next to Lyndon Baines Johnson. Johnson never lets Rowley out of his sight. Rowley becomes literally his personal Secret Service bodyguard, the head of the Secret Service agency itself, Eric, James Rowley. And through the Secret Service, they evade the FBI day after day after day after day, keeping, and at one point, it almost, guns were drawn and there was almost a shootout at that motel, according to documentary evidence.
Wow. Is it Peter or Paul Gregory? I'm getting confused. I'm trying to.
Peter Gregory is the father. Paul Gregory is the son.
Okay.
Paul Gregory has a new book out, which is a bunch of lies about him and Marina. But Paul Gregory is the kid who goes and gets lessons from her. But Peter Gregory is the one that has to translate the. I don't know what this is, but
that's Paul Gregory.
Okay.
Who's tied in?
Okay, but Peter Gregory is the one who's assigned by the Warren Commission to be her official translator in chief, Eric. But just getting back to the money, Marie Tippett, the wife of the slain officer J.D. Tippett, she receives, and I know this is going to blow people's minds, in checks in the mail, $4.5 million.
Wow.
That's right. Wow. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. The Secret Service, on their own, says, we can't deal with these checks. She needs a manager and a lawyer. So they take this guy. There's a guy that you really named James Martin. And there's a photo I sent you, this guy, James Martin. You got to see this guy. He's the manager of the inn at Six Flags over Texas. Yeah, this guy here. This guy's the manager of the inn. He's a sketchy dude. And he is assigned the job of managing Marina Oswald. And when I say manage, I mean he signs a contract with her and his lawyer friend, Thorne, James Thorne, becomes her lawyer. To collectively, they take 25% of everything that comes in. 15 and 10. 15 and 10. Okay. Neither one of them have done this work before. Okay. So what are they taking 15 and 10 from? How about $5,000 for the photos that we described, the gun photo? $5,000 times 7 today, $35,000 for that photo, Life magazine. $70,000 they sold the gun to a guy named John King down in Texas. $150,000 for his historic diary that becomes serialized in Life magazine, as shown right here. Here's a picture of the cover of Life magazine. This ends up being like $150,000, $160,000 for that. So they're taking 10 and 15%. $350,000, $400,000 for the book deal, Marina and Lee, for Priscilla McMillan. Now, Priscilla McMillan will be featured in Max Good's documentary on Ruth Paine. You'll see Patricia McMillan. Patricia McMillan, that is with her, on the right is Patricia McMillan. This is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That's Patricia McMillan's cousin in the middle and Ruth Paine on the left. She will be assigned to interview Lee Harvey Oswald in the Metropole Hotel in Moscow when he defects. Just a random event. She's the author. No, this is great. She's the reporter assigned to interview Lee Harvey Oswald in Moscow. Now, what did she do before that? She worked as a secretary for JFK. So she goes.
Busy girl.
Busy girl. She worked for JFK as a secretary, becomes a reporter, interviews Lee Harvey Oswald for the wire services in when he was defecting, and then is assigned to do a book on the entire life of Marina Oswald with Lee. The book gets Marina close to $400,000 in it's from Harper as an advance, so these guys are taking 25% of that off the top. She also did the biography of Khrushchev's daughter who defected. So this is a deep state spook author, and there's a bunch of these cats. We've talked about them before. She's featured if anybody wants to see her. She recently passed away, I think 2 years ago. But there's some photos of her with Marina. I don't know. But there's that one. There's a couple others where she goes to do some things with her in Europe too. So she becomes Marina's shadow. Now you say, well, what's the big deal? She's got a book deal, right? How long could it take to write the book? It takes her on purpose 14 years to write the book. And what that does is, in the contract for 14 years, Marina Oswald is not allowed to do any press because of the book contract. Capiche? And that's why she took 14 years to write the book. That's her on the right there, Priscilla McMillan with Marina Oswald. This is in 77, I think. So the book doesn't come out for 14 years. And that's intentional to bottle up Marina and her story. Now, you say, well, what about the movies? I don't understand. The CIA creates a phony film company in Italy called Tex Italia Films. They pay Marina 450, maybe $500,000 for the film rights to her life. Okay. And then also $1,500 times seven, like $8,000 for any personal appearance that she makes. The Tex Italia Film Company disappears after the contract is issued. The entire purpose of it was to stop anyone else from using Marina's life rights in a story or in a film.
How much money are we up to so far?
Dude, it's in the millions. It was in the millions. She buys a house. She buys a house. By the way, if you want to take a look at a film after it expired, take a look at this. After the deal ran out many years later, this is 1997, she does a film with Frank Whaley and Helena Bonham Carter called Fatal Deception, which I would recommend. It's a movie of the week, but it's really well done. It comes out in 1997 with Frank and her. He's a good Oswald. Don't forget, he plays Oswald's double in JFK, Frank Whaley. Anyway, so yeah, it's in the millions, and she is on Easy Street now. She buys a house, a brand new air-conditioned house in Richardson, Texas, but she's a widow. She joins a private club, Eric, called the Music Box. This upscale private club, and she starts drinking vodka and chain smoking and partying, and goes completely wild sexually. I mean, she has more boyfriends, than Rex Reed from the New York Post. The situation becomes out of control, where guys are just picking her up and doing stuff with her. But let's get back to James Martin, because James Martin is another deep state operative. The James Martin photo that you showed, I just want to explain what James Martin does, and you'll begin to understand how they're working this system. There's some FBI documents I'll read from them on James Martin. Martin, to get her out of the motel, he's got a wife and 4 kids. He invites her over for Thanksgiving and says, you could live with my wife and 4 kids. And she says, oh, thank you. The Secret Service goes, that's a great idea. We get her out of this motel. She could be in there with James Martin, one of our guys that we handpicked, and we know where she is, and he's her manager, right, Eric? So, I mean, Thorne, the lawyer, signs off on it. So it starts out with Thanksgiving. She accepts an invitation. This is an internal FBI report, February 19th, 1964, out of Dallas, to the assistant director, by the way, William Sullivan, telecall also. It says, while residing at the Inn of Six Flags near Dallas under surveillance of the Secret Service immediately following the assassination, she was informed by the Secret Service agent that Martin had invited her and the children to reside at his home. She accepted the invitation to visit Martin home on Thanksgiving. While at the Martin home on that occasion, accepted an invitation from Mr. and Mrs. Martin to reside with them. She moved to their home about November 29 or 30th, 1963, resided there until her trip to Washington the week of February, to the Warren Commission testimony. She was under the surveillance of the Secret Service at the Martin house the entire time. Okay, this is where it gets interesting, Eric. Shortly after beginning residence at the Martin home, her intuition told her that Martin had feelings of love toward her, and New Year's Eve, after refusing to be kissed by Martin, When he asked to give her a New Year's kiss in the presence of his own wife, Eric, Martin subsequently caught her in the hallway and told her he loved her and then kissed her. She believed him sincerely. Following this event, Martin almost daily professed his love for her. And now keep in mind, she's loaded for bear financially. She's got all the money you were asking about. He also propositioned her to have sexual relations, but she refused. She did tell Martin that she was willing to be his mistress, and they made plans when she would have a place of her own and he would visit her clandestinely. Martin also gave her several gifts. About January 4th last, Martin took her alone to the La Tunisia restaurant in Dallas, Eric. Two Secret Service agents occupied a table nearby. They enjoyed a good dinner. I presume the couple, not the Secret Service agents. Martin professed his love to her, and she replied everything would be fine if it were not for his family. She did not have sexual intercourse with Martin at the Martin home. Following her testimony in Washington on Friday, February 7th, this is Warren Commission testimony. She was the first witness in the Warren Commission. She testified for over 20 hours. She requested the Secret Service withdraw its surveillance, Eric, of her. The surveillance was withdrawn about noon that day. She had 2 rooms at the Willard Hotel. Everything happens at the Willard Hotel. That's where Attorney General Robert Kennedy wiretapped Martin Luther King at the Willard Hotel for his sexual rendezvous. On the 3rd floor, and on Friday, February 7th, Thorne, the attorney, and Martin moved to the adjoining room to her, which the Secret Service had occupied until their withdrawal. On this Friday, she and Martin and June ate together, and thereafter took a walk in Washington. They returned to the hotel about 7 and 8. That evening, they slept together and engaged in massive sexual intercourse. They slept together the entire night. This was done with Marina's consent. There was no force whatsoever on the part of Martin. The interpreter said there was rumors Martin loved her, and these rumors might be so detrimental as to lead to her deportation from this country. Martin told her he had friends who could fix up a fictitious marriage between him and her, which would forestall deportation. Now he's trying to get her and her money. And then Robert Oswald shows up and he fires both of them. He gets hip to this, and he's told by Alan Dulles to get rid of these guys. And she is given his attorney, William Mackenzie, who was Robert's attorney at the time. And then she takes up residence with Robert Oswald, Eric, and he will then have an affair with her. It just goes, the sex stuff is just really crazy.
I can't tell for sure. This could be him or it could be Porter. The face looks similar to Martin.
No, that's Porter. We'll get it. That's why I said be careful, because that's her husband. That's not.
Yeah, they look very similar.
That's her type. That's who she's into. That's just the type she's into, which is fine. But I just wanted to get the Martin thing because he is going to be fired now during her Warren Commission testimony, and Mackenzie, another deep state lawyer, will replace him. Okay, so I just want to get into the Warren Commission testimony because she will completely change her story repeatedly during the Warren Commission testimony to where the Warren Commission gets so fed up with her that internally they're talking among themselves that we can't believe a word she's saying. Okay, this is also her made up cock and bull Secret Service story that they're trying to get out there. And I'm just going to, these are my own notes on various testimonial contradictions that she made in all different courts. This is just a whole thing that I have in my files on her contradictory statements in all these different legal places. Okay, so I'm starting just with the Warren Commission. I just want to give you a couple of samples. Okay, this is about why it's interesting to us, is about Mexico City. So I'll just give an example. So this is from 12, let's start with 11/29/1963. These are FBI reports, internal FBI quotes. This is CE 1781, FBI. When asked what the arrangements were at the time she left New Orleans, Ms. Oswald said that her husband was to remain there in New Orleans or return to Dallas, but no arrangements were ever made for him to go to Mexico City. This is just about Mexico City, Eric. FBI, 11/29, same day, same form. Mrs. Oswald said that she did not know anything about any trip that Oswald may have made to Mexico City. She said that Oswald had not volunteered any information about where she had been or what he had done. FBI, this is now December 5th, 1963, CE 1401. Oswald never stated that he was making plans to go to Cuba. He did not mention that he had made application for a visa to go to Cuba. He did not state in September when Marina left New Orleans that he intended to go to Mexico or go to Cuba. Okay. 11/17/1964. FBI. Marina was again questioned concerning the trip taken by Lee Harvey Oswald to Mexico in September, October 1963. She said Oswald had not told her anything whatsoever about any intentions on his part to go to Mexico. She said that he had not told her upon his return to Dallas in early October 1963 that he'd been to Mexico. She said she received no information whatever that he had intentions of going to Mexico or that he had been to Mexico. She said her first knowledge of Oswald's travel to Mexico had been that which she gained from television, Eric, programs in Dallas immediately following the assassination of the president. 122/64, concerning this trip to Mexico, Marina said that she did not know that he intended to go to Mexico, nor did she know that he had taken a trip to Mexico. This goes on and on. These are all internal FBI documents. Now I'm going to show you why it's important. Because a couple of months later, she testifies before the Warren Commission. Volume 1, page 23, February 3rd, 1964. This is from Rankin. Mrs. Oswald, first, this is coming from the testimony in D.C. Mrs. Oswald, this is from Marina. Nothing. And it is at that time, hold on. Nothing. And it is at that time I wrote a letter to Mrs. Payne telling her that Lee was out of work and they invited me to come and stay with her. And when I left her, I knew that Lee would go to Mexico City, Eric. But of course, I didn't. I didn't tell Mrs. Payne about it. Mr. Rankin, had he discussed with you the idea of going to Mexico City? Marina Oswald, yes. Mr. Rankin, when did he first discuss that? Mrs. Oswald, I think it was August. Mr. Rankin, did he tell you why he wanted to go to Mexico City? Of course, from Mexico City, he wanted to go to Cuba, perhaps through the Russian embassy to Mexico. Somehow we would be able to get to Cuba. So you begin to see, and there's dozens and dozens of these examples where the internal FBI interviews of her completely contradict her testimony in front of the Warren Commission. Because when the FBI is done with her, the Secret Service takes over and they begin to construct this story. And the story, part of the story, which was head off as World War III by LBJ, was that Oswald was going to kill the president, have his visa ready to go to Cuba, and then back to the Soviet Union. And then we would start World War III by invading Cuba and retaliating against the Soviets. That was the structure of the entire deal. When LBJ got in, he said, look, I'm the president now, boys. I don't need the aggravation. So I'm just going to call off your little World War III, and I'm going to give you this little piece of Southeast Asia. You want your effing war? That's the quote. Here's your effing war. And he signs the executive order changing JFK's withdrawal of troops in Southeast Asia to begin the Vietnam War. So they were in a situation where there's a heist, and the guy, you ever see these heist movies where they don't trust each other, and then one guy kills the rest and keeps all the jewels? That's what they were afraid of with LBJ. So LBJ, how could you trust him? Is he going to go through with World War III? Is he going to pull the chicken switch on us, boys? Well, what he did smartly, LBJ, was he screwed them, but he gave them Southeast Asia. He gave them a booby prize. And that was brilliant on the part of LBJ to keep them off his back. But she is forced to testify before the Warren Commission for 20 hours. And in there is all kinds of contradiction where she says he liked President Kennedy and he liked John Connally. She'll later say that he was trying to shoot John Connally. And then Rankin says, Miss Oswald, not for nothing, but he said he liked John Connally and would have voted for him for governor. So in the testimony, I think she's intentionally fucking with them. This is my takeaway, that because she contradicts herself over and over and over again. and there's really nothing they could do to her. She's doing their bidding. She's just acting as if I can't understand the what you're saying. So the guy who is the translator, Peter Gregory, at one point says to the Warren Commission after she says, I don't think he shot Connolly because she liked him. Peter Gregory interrupts and says, maybe she changed her mind, to the Warren Commission. And Rankin says, what's it to you? He says, you're the translator. Anyway, there's translation. Go ahead. Let's see what you got there.
Yeah, I've got some footage on it.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
He did like Fidel Castro, and at the time, so did I.
Now, this is later on.
This is 1977 before the House Assassinations Committee.
Okay.
Because it was, he was presented to the Russian public as a very good fellow.
Specifically, did he ever talk about President Kennedy?
Whatever he said about President Kennedy, it was only good always.
Did Oswald keep ammunition, cartridges around the apartment?
Yeah, he kept rifle and I guess ammunition, what you call it, all together.
Directing your attention to that day, April 10th.
This is Walker.
Well, I cannot
this is the Walker
shooting. The timing and all the very vivid details of the day. I just can state it that that particular night he did not come home till very late.
She's lying here. She's lying.
And when he did not come at regular time, I was worried about him, so I found a note addressed to me, what to do in case if he did not come home. Of course, I was petrified and nobody I can turn to.
She's referring to a letter that Oswald supposedly wrote, undated, about what she should do if he's apprehended for the Walker shooting. He doesn't mention Walker in the letter. He doesn't have a date on the letter. Highly debated whether he even
is that the one Ruth Paine found, or
Ruth Paine wrote it and also found, but nevertheless, she contradicts herself because there's FBI interviews with her repeatedly in the documents that I was just referring to. Was there any ammunition ever in the house? She says, no, I never saw any of it. And she says, did you ever see him take his gun to go shoot target practice? And she says, no. Did you ever see him leave with the gun, either in New Orleans or Dallas? No. Did he ever go to shoot target practice? No. Over and over and over again, she tells the FBI that there was no ammo, no target practice, no nothing. Then when she gets on the stand, he's constantly leaving with the rifle to go have target practice. And it's preposterous because he's getting on a city bus with a rifle wrapped in a blanket that he buries in the ground after the Walker shooting. The case is very weak, and she doesn't make it any stronger by contradicting herself in the Warren Commission and the testimony here. She'll do the same thing in the Clay Shaw trial. She will later, I think, play herself in the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald, the mock trial, the one that was British with Spence.
Jerry Spence and
Bugliosi. Yeah, she plays herself there. I think she was in that one. I know Ruth Paine was in it. Anyway, so she now is a woman with a lot of money and 2 kids. And a guy comes riding up on a horse. I swear to God, you can't make this up. It's like something out of a romance novel, Eric. And it's a guy named Kenneth Porter. And Kenneth Porter is 6'2". The photo you were showing of Kenneth Porter with her, that's Kenneth Porter. He rides up on a horse. He's a race car driver and has, of course, a wife and a couple of kids. He himself has a wife and a couple of kids, and he immediately gets rid of his wife and couple of kids and marries Marina Oswald. Kenneth Porter. Let's see what you got here. There he is with her.
Good-looking guy.
Great-looking guy. He works for a company called Collins Radio. And you say, well, what is Collins Radio? Collins Radio is a spook intelligence communications company that was a subsidiary of Texas Instruments. And it was involved in the communication systems set up secretly for our submarine systems in the Navy. Collins Radio goes so far, it goes into the Australian Navy. For our Australian followers, Collins Radio was set up for Soviet American sub warfare, and the communications system was designed by a guy named Admiral Henry Bruton. Admiral Henry Bruton becomes the head of Collins Radio. This guy, Kenneth Porter, works for Collins Radio. Here's Bruton. Bruton's got a house in Texas outside of Dallas, a big mansion. Who shows up? George de Mohrenschildt to use his pool with Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina Oswald to go swimming in the pool of the head of Collins Radio. This is when Oswald was still alive. He's being shepherded. He's a friend of George de Mohrenschildt, Bruton. Here's George de Mohrenschildt, very close to Bruton. Bruton is O&I. He completely built and created the entire U.S. submarine warfare communications system and the codes. And Collins Radio was the private company he formed after that as part of the Cold War, and also down in Australia. They also use Collins Radio for their Australian submarines. So this guy, Porter, now comes into the picture, Eric, to babysit Marina Oswald, because we can't just let her loose on the United States by herself. So you've had George de Mohrenschildt, you had Lee Harvey Oswald, you had Priscilla McMillan, you had Ruth Payne as a handler. Now the new handler is Kenneth Porter. Porter comes into the picture. What happens to Kenneth Porter? Well, 11 days later, after this incredible fairy tale marriage, he smacks the living shit out of her. She calls up the FBI and says, this guy's beating me up. He's out of his mind. She goes into court, and the judge calls him up on the phone. The judge in the case, in the court, calls him up and said, did you beat this woman? And he says, I'm drunk right now, judge. And he says, I want you to come down here. And he says, if you issue a warrant, I'll come down there, but I ain't coming down there otherwise. So the judge issues a warrant. Porter goes down to court, and he's having domestic. There they are in court. The happy newlyweds. Well, I'll read you this. This is from March 5th, 1965, FBI document. 11:45 p.m., they get a call from Catherine Ford, one of the previous handlers. She's one of the White Russians. Catherine Ford telephonically reports she just received a call from Marina Porter, who said her husband, Kenneth Jess Porter, had locked himself in the bedroom and prepared his last will and testament, which he furnished to Marina and told her he intended to commit, you know what? Mr. Porter then allegedly tore up the will and testament and again retired to his bedroom, where he prepared a second will and testament. Mrs. Ford stated that it was her understanding that Porter was inebriated. They contact the local police, and then the police go over, and she's calling the FBI because she's got a personal FBI agent over there, Marina. And the FBI says, I can't do anything about it. You're going to have to call the Dallas police, which she does. So this is her new husband. He leaves his kids with his ex-wife. He's now raising her two kids. Her two kids are now June, and Rachel is the younger one. June and Rachel are going to public schools in Richardson, Texas. June and Rachel will actually grow up to be pretty damn good kids based on everything they had to go through. There's a kid that they have together named Mark. One kid between Porter and Marina is a kid named Mark, who becomes their child. I don't know what happened to his kids. He gives custody of them to his ex-wife, who he immediately dumps and marries Marina Oswald, and spends or enjoys the money that you were asking about. This is June years later.
This is Rachel.
This is Rachel years later. I'm sorry. Rachel, interestingly enough, will become a gymnast. She'll become a ballerina. She'll become the head of the varsity cheerleading squad. Very talented girl who will work for 7 years as a bartender at a place in Austin that I've been to called the Texas Chili Parlor, where she was the bartender there and put herself through nursing school and get a nursing degree. And she's still, I believe, a practicing nurse in Texas right now.
This is her talking about her high school, if you wanted that or not.
we would have the local eyewitness news teams follow us to school.
And when Rachel arrived at school, she was the only girl in class whose daddy's name appeared in the history book.
Everything written then, or at least everything I was exposed to or heard about, never talked about innocence, so I always thought that he did it.
As she grew into womanhood, Rachel left her small town and ventured into the big city to go to college. But wherever she went, she felt like a marked woman, reluctant to reveal her true name.
Audrey Marina Rachel Oswald Porter. However, I only go by Porter as a safety measure.
And she soon found the consequences of letting people know that her father was one of the most infamous men of our time.
I've had attention from men when I did not have attention from them until they knew who I was. And suddenly I have a lot of attention from men. I can think of one man in particular, or two men in particular, who think that I'm just terrific only because I'm Lee Harvey Oswald's daughter. They think that I have a connection with a famous person, and it's like they're brushed with fame, I think. Oh, I see. Which is
kind of sick.
Yeah, I know. And the other one is the older one. That was this one here, yeah. This is June.
For 25 years, it was a subject that we didn't talk about that much around the house. Mom really tried to keep us sheltered, and until recently, there hasn't been a reason that I've needed to come forward. But really, now I'm really concerned about books and articles that are coming out saying the case is closed and the case is not closed. There's still a lot of information that's out there that we'd like to get from me and my family.
I assume you're alluding to the Posner book yesterday that we had on this program and talked about. It's a book called Case Closed that claims to be the definitive work and says that your dad killed JFK. You don't think so?
Right. Well, I don't think there can be a definitive work on the assassination, whether it's pro-Warren Commission or anti-Warren Commission, without all the information released. There's still information in files. There's still information in private files, such as life, that we need to have all the pieces to the puzzle before any definitive work can be completed. I'm very excited about anybody that does research, Mr. Posner or other researchers, anybody that's doing research to try to find out the truth. I just want to know what really happened in November 1960.
Yeah, they will hook up with David Lifton, actually, one of the great original second-generation researchers who wrote Best Evidence. But in 1965, I just want to getting back to the post-assassination period, post-Warren Commission period, Marina is contacted by a minister in Detroit, Michigan, and the guy who contacts her is a minister there at a Presbyterian church, and he will later move to New York and become a spook minister there. He wants to teach her English at the University of Michigan. And it's called the English Language Institute at the university. This is the University of Michigan here. This is through the church and through that's Reverend Ernest T. Campbell, who will later become like a Sloan Coffin kind of guy who works with the intelligence agencies. They have a system like the Monterey Language School at the University of Michigan, Eric, and it's called the English Language Institute, ELI. They want to run her through ELI and get her up to speed on speaking English in 1965 because they want to use her for propaganda purposes. And she agrees to go and enroll at the University of Michigan. The University of Michigan will be later cited as one of the most CIA-centered campuses in the United States for recruitment, by the way. This is at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. She will go to this school to learn English, and there's an FBI report on her. I just wanted to read of what she's doing there at the University of Michigan. It's a very short note from Detroit FBI to the director, and this is February 1st, 1965, Eric. Marina Oswald is currently attending an intensive English course at the University of Michigan, Eric. Through the chief of police and established sources at Michigan University, we have learned that Marina Oswald is doing extremely poor in her classwork and is rapidly gaining a reputation for patronizing local dives and beatnik establishments, catering to interracial activity. She is dating various individuals and reportedly stays out with her gentleman friends practically all night. In recent days, she has been reported to be extremely nervous and appears to be considerably worried. Officials at the University of Michigan feel Marina may be involved with a tough gang and may be in some sort of trouble. This is from the FBI, just on her going to the University of Michigan to learn to learn the language of English. I don't know what that was about. I stumbled onto that FBI report. But what happens is in 1978, she, like you showed, she was testifying before, in 77, she testified before the House Assassinations Committee, and she begins to change her tune to where her husband didn't do it anymore, that it may have been a conspiracy. So much so that in 1979, she's contacted by a British author named Michael Endowes. And Michael Endowes tells her, he wrote a book called The Oswald File, which I have. And in that file, he says, and in the book, and to her, he convinces her that the guy buried, this is Michael Endowes, he's a British author, who actually was instrumental in doing away with the British death penalty. He found a guy who was hung and proved that he was innocent posthumously, and it ended up that his work did away with the British death penalty. But in this case, he says that a KGB agent is in Oswald's grave, and when he came back from Minsk, it wasn't Oswald, it was a lookalike KGB agent. He convinces Marina Oswald to do the paperwork to dig up Oswald out of the ground in 1981, Eric, and have another autopsy at Parkland Hospital. They dig up his grave. This is the empty grave, 1981. It's an amazing
By the way, I
story.
think it's Ed Dowes.
Eddowes. I don't know. Eddowes. Eddowes.
Yeah.
He convinces her to dig up her husband and have an autopsy because he claims that the skull of this guy there did not have the mastoid scar that I referred to earlier from the mastoid surgery that he had in Minsk. So they take the body, the skeleton, they bring it to Parkland. This was a whole big deal in 1981, and lo and behold, it's Oswald. So they put through the teeth, they find out that is indeed Oswald, and she was either duped by this guy or the guy wanted to sell books or whatever the hell is going on. She went for this, which was really bizarre in 1981. So she puts him back in the ground at that point and begins at the same time to work because she's doing odd jobs. The money is gone. She's working at a shopping mall called Town East Mall in Mesquite, Texas.
Hold on, the money is gone.
Money is gone, my friend.
Much?
It's all gone.
Wow.
That's right. Let me repeat this. She's working in like a knitting materials store in one of the craziest shopping malls ever built. And people from Texas know this mall. It's called the Town East Mall in Mesquite, Texas. And I don't know if you have any photos of it, but it is a spectacular mall. This one doesn't do it justice. There's a couple of others. Yeah, you could get a look at this place because this was at the peak of mall craziness. This was the Cadillac this was the first one. This was the first massive mall, and it was in Texas. And while she was there working, they filmed a movie. And this movie was filmed while she was working in Mesquite, Texas. And if you look at the cover of the box of the movie that I sent you, it's a movie called Cotton Candy. And I don't know if you could see the box, but there's two people in this movie. One is the director, and I don't know if you could see, there's him and his brother, Ron Howard's. It's Ron Howard's second movie, and it's filmed in mostly in the shopping mall, and it's like a Battle of the Bands movie. It's actually pretty good. I have a copy of it. And it's shot while Marina, she's not in it, but she could be an extra in the background because so many people are in the background in this mall that I always presumed she was one of the extras in there. Ron Howard and his brother write and direct this teen movie. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I highly recommend it if you could find it. It's called Cotton Candy. And it's really about a battle of the bands, and it culminates in the mall, and they try to undermine each other, and really cool. And I think it was Ron Howard's second directorial debut. So she ends up working these odd jobs. I don't know what her husband does other than race cars, and he's divorced twice, and he is obviously doing some spooky stuff because of the Collins radio. But there he is with her again. She goes to Paris to do a TV show, a documentary type TV show in Paris. I don't know if she ever made it back to the Soviet Union or in the 80s. Eric, I don't know if she made it back there, but I know this is her in Paris. This is in the 80s. It's her in a car in Paris. She's going to do a TV documentary there. Apparently paid well to go to Paris and do this. Oddly enough, Kenneth Porter, the husband, died at the age of 86, just over 90 days ago. He died in this past October. Yeah, passed away. That's how, and they stayed married the entire time.
Oh, they did stay married.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. They never separated after that. Whatever happened, happened. And I'll tell you the truth, I don't know what happened, but she certainly had and is having an incredibly fulfilling life. This is her recently, maybe 8 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. But for her age that she is, I mean, she looks
She's in
better.
her 80s now.
She looks better than Bridget Fonda. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, so she got involved in a bunch of different things and slowly but surely began to move over into the conspiracy realm that her husband was a victim of a setup, and that she, initially and now, in fact, in recent years has said that they browbeat this story into her, and they threatened her with deportation and jailing for her lying about being a member of the Communist Party. They threatened to deport her. They threatened to jail her. That was quite intimidating for someone who was 22 years old, single, with 2 kids. I mean, they just tortured her.
Well, especially with her background. Keep in mind that her father stepfather threw out of the house. So she'd been through it before, but now had 2 kids to deal with at the same time.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
And the 2 kids grew up to be fantastic kids, beyond reproach. So the proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, Groubert knows them, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot of people know them. In fact, I think Max Good spoke to her briefly, and she told him to get out of this business. That it's a losing. I think that's what she, indirectly paraphrasing, told Max Good on the phone.
Yeah, he talks about it in the movie.
He talks about it in the movie, right? Doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
And in the episode we did with him, that he spoke to her on the phone. Other people have too. Most people have respected their privacy, and people knew that she worked. The daughter worked at the Texas Chili Parlor in Austin, but it was actually in one guidebook, to be honest with you. In the old days, it was actually in a guidebook, a travel, offbeat travel guidebook of Austin. But I mean, there's some stuff that she knows that other people do not know. In other words, when they showed her the photo of the car in General Walker's driveway that allegedly Oswald took, the license plate was not blacked out. And when the Warren Commission showed her the photo of the car in the driveway, she said that blacking out of the license plate was not there when I looked at the photo. And the reason it was blacked out was because it would indicate the year of the photo. And people believed that it was when Oswald was not even in the country. In other words, it would have the tags on the license plate.
Okay.
It was Walker's own car. There was no reason to hide the plate.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would say 59 in the corner, and he was, or 60 in the corner. Yeah, there it is. That was done after she identified the photo. She said that was done afterwards by the Secret Service to obscure that license plate. And I originally thought it was about the plate number itself, but other people have informed me that it's about the year on the plate that would indicate the photo date and put him out of the country.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's smarter. I never would have come up with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, give him credit for attention to detail.
Yeah. I mean, somebody saw that. Yeah, she gets Stern Magazine pays her, I think, almost $100,000 for her story. These numbers are pretty big. He's pretty
I
big.
can't believe that she burned through all that money, though. That's
well, I mean, keep in mind she's got this husband and she's got the kids, and he's paying alimony. They had to put the 2 kids through college. They had his kid. I don't know how long it took, but she did go to work and he went to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew, amazing. All right. Well, before we move on to super chats, I do want to talk about something that we haven't talked about for a while, and it's the fact we have the JFK assassination cards. On
right,
this subject, we
Yeah.
definitely should mention that. These are available at americasuntoldstories.com.
Is there a
JFK
Marina
cards.
Oswald? Is there a Marina Oswald?
No, there will be. We
okay.
had not done a Marina Oswald yet, but I'm going to start generating again.
Oh, how do I get these, Hunley?
You can go to in the description. There will be a link, but americasuntoldstories.com/JFK cards. And you can see how they're sold in different sets, and we have a lot of them out there. And since we're starting up or continuing the JFK, there will be more sets coming out, including Marina Oswald. H.L. Hunt will probably be.
What about Marguerite, the mother?
Marguerite will be on after our next episode, right?
Yeah. Whoa. Whoa. We got our own JFK files, bro. We don't need those stinking files.
That's right.
We got our own JFK files.
Exactly. And you guys may want to check them out. A lot of people, have gotten them. They really like them.
Yeah, it's a good gift. It comes in that little thing, right?
Well, you can get that thing and other, there's different setups and different ways of collecting them.
Okay.
So
you could collect them all, though. Nobody has these, bro.
Only some.
America's Untold Stories.
That's right. And I do recommend everybody checks them out. And on to super chats we have from Dr. Evil.
Yeah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'm aware of that every year. Now it's got some resonance because they are dealing with the situation in Gaza. Just a different era now.
Adam Cohn, how about an episode on the Hunt family in order of the chiefs in the 50 in the SB, I guess? H.L. Hunt, I guess.
And he wants me to do a Super Bowl episode on the Chiefs.
Oh, that's right. The Hunt. Who was H.L. that owned the Chiefs, or is it the son that owned the Chiefs?
I think it was passed down from father to son to whoever owns it now. It's a family ownership thing.
All right. Well,
but Hunt the son is on the list. H.L. is on the list. The son was really the one who was dealing with Jim Braden and Ruby and putting the ad in the paper was the son.
And we have
in Dallas
on both of them, by the way.
Yeah,
Jim Braden and Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
For anyone who wants to check those out. Let's see. Pamela Clifton. Happy Tuesday, guys. Yes. It's a shame the deep state uses James files, etc., to distract people from what we should focus on.
It's a shame that anybody buys into it. I don't blame them for trying, Pamela. If they weren't trying, yeah. What's a shame is the people who just don't know enough to walk away. I don't blame them. I mean, this is what they do.
Yep.
It's a shame if you dedicate your life to it and thinking that's for real.
And I mean, they are, highly trained. This is one of the top intelligence agencies in the world.
And I'll tell you, when you do a limited hangout, there are elements of James File's story that, of course, have to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, which are they, Mark? Why don't you dedicate your life to find out which are true and which are not true? Well, that's what they'd like me to do instead of doing what I just did.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense to you people out there.
100%. Michael Hebner, sorry. Mark knows all the Hollywood peeps. What about Chaos, Manson, and Tom O'Neill? Has Mark done anything with this subject? I've interviewed Tom O'Neill on my channel. If you guys want to talk about it, we've brought up Tom O'Neill and Chaos multiple times.
Yeah.
We brought him up in the Jolly West show that we did. I think we brought him up with Sidney Gottlieb. He's come up many times, but I also have interviewed him.
He's working on a Jolly West book.
Yes, he is.
Just so you know, Michael.
Shane Culkin, in my opinion, any useful documents have been long destroyed, correct?
Absolutely incorrect. Couldn't be further from the truth, my friend. I mean, the amount of information I've learned from the available documents has quadrupled my amount of information from when I started this thing. Just from the documents that have been released in the past 10 years, the amount of information is breathtaking.
And a lot of documents that seem innocuous can be very enlightening. And
they don't know enough to not know what documents to not release. In other words, they don't know how the dots are connected themselves, if that makes any sense. There's no master computer that says if you release this, it's going to trigger that. These documents are all interconnected, and they don't even know how. We know more than they do at this point. I mean, think who you're thinking about. You're talking about some bureaucrat who works at the National Archives, or somebody who is the archivist wondering, is this document flammable? Because it says this. It's not like these documents say smoking gun language. They're very innocuous, but to us, they're not innocuous because they connect the dot to something else. We're at a better advantage than they are now in terms of document releases. Last year alone, thousands of documents, 2023, were released.
Especially because everyone involved who would know on the other
is
side
gone. They're all gone.
They're dead. So it's not like
That's why they're erring on the side of caution by not wanting to release anything, because they don't know the value of what they're releasing, in my humble opinion.
Right. And there's nobody who's dedicated their life to knowing every bit of the information to cover it up. Only the people who are trying to uncover it know the information well enough.
Right. I mean, there are documents I've looked at and I'm going, oh my God. Like, we use that example of the redacted one about E. Howard Hunt, that he's a novelist, and there's plenty of redacted and unredacted stuff about E. Howard Hunt. And that's just an example. There are people who are redacting this stuff who don't even realize that a paragraph later, because of their own ignorance, they're revealing that it's E. Howard Hunt based on the name of a novel that he wrote that I would know.
Yeah, and then
just to give a minor example. I mean, there's better examples than that, but
no, that's a great one. But then other ones would be if they mention a person and 5 duty stations, all you have to do is check. Oh, okay, well, they were there and there and there and there. They're the only two. There's only 2 people who were there. Blah 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 blah.
They can't keep up with it. They can't keep up with it, and there's people out there, and I'm not one of them, who do these deep dive and live and breathe these files all the time, who can't wait for the next file to come out. So to answer your question, the answer is no.
All right. Sean Lucan gifted 10 America's Untold Stories memberships, which we definitely appreciate. Pew Pew is back. He's been a member for 7 months. Love these JFK related shows. Thank you, Mark or Eric and Mark. And we will be doing these. Our plan is 1 a month, for the next couple of years, right?
Yeah, it's going to take a couple of years. Sure.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
No.
So people just know this because we're doing news.
Yeah. There's no shame in that. It takes weeks to put it together. That's why I can't. What did he say? What did Al say?
Well, I was letting you finish your sentence.
I'm sorry.
I feel like everyone watching should get 3 college credits for this episode. Simply superb. Trove of knowledge, bravo. Yes, and that's it. I mean, there's a ton here. Now, people are saying, well, wait a minute, you had a lot of them before. Well, Mark had like years accumulated of different things that had already been written out. Now he's having to dig and research.
Well, not only that, you couldn't tell these other episodes until those other episodes were out, because you can't reference the other episodes. There's got to be a certain order to it. Otherwise, it sounds insane. Like if I'm referencing Spring Hill College with Eugene Muret, there's got to be an episode there that explains what that is, or I can't reference it. And, just in this particular episode, for instance, there's got to be the previous foundation for the next episode, if that makes any sense.
And really, folks, but just trust me on this. There's I think over 60 episodes of JFK.
Is that true?
I believe so.
Wow.
And just the episodes and then the Q&As. You could go through these. I mean, this is hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. This is a 2-hour episode right now. We're at over 2 hours in.
Wow.
So there's just so much here to chew on. K-Dog, have you read Brad Meltzer's JFK book?
Yeah, I'm going to waste my life doing that. I mean, the guy's a deep state dude. I mean, put it this way. They usually live the longest. They probably have the best healthcare system. The fact that these people live to be 90, every one of them, they must, whatever it is, that deep state health plan is the greatest health plan in the history of the world.
Middle-aged grind. Have you looked into the Jean-Benet Ramsey killing?
Not my thing, bro.
No.
It's not my thing.
You're not a true crime guy, are you?
No, I don't care about this stuff. You got the wrong channel.
Fletcher
it's
boy.
not what we do. I mean, it's just.
Our federal government has a long history of honesty and openness. I definitely trust them. Okay, I'm lying.
Well, look, I mean, you had the coal. I'll give you an example. I mean, the reason I mention Australia is because when you get into Collins Radio, there becomes a kerfuffle with Australia about Collins Radio. When you get into Mexico City, you get into a kerfuffle with the Mexican government about their intelligence. And I think this is what's at the bottom of the barrel in terms of files, these international things involving other countries. Now, is Australia involved in the assassination? No, but they're involved with Collins Radio. They're involved with submarine warfare. They're involved with using our intelligence, Five Eyes, for various things that they're involved in. And I think a lot of that is ancillary material that they never wanted to release, if possible.
Well, that and the big smoking gun of the IRS records. I mean, it's like, how much would that just answer right there? It's like, oh, O&I, employer. Okay. Done. I mean, it would just.
There's a reason they've been sealed for 65 years. There's a reason. It's not because he deducted a television set that he won on Truth or Consequences, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
There's a reason for this. Are they kidding? They think, I mean, if it's not there, I would be surprised, because the IRS very rarely prevents people through FOIA from getting something for 65 years, and then all of a sudden says we don't have it anymore. They didn't say that with Trump's. I mean, they got that right over to the New York Times.
Well, you know, that just like the Tea Party people. But anyway,
yeah.
Chris Patton, thank you for another excellent episode. Do you think there might be any unreleased files that will be embarrassing to JFK, like info about his affairs?
I don't know if they're embarrassing. JFK has been dead for a long time. Embarrassing to who? Embarrassing to. I mean, I mean,
maybe LBJ. I mean.
That's why I think Cohen is in there to try to suss that out. I don't think Peter Cohen woke up one day and said, I am the leading expert on JFK. I've got to get on this board. I mean, he's there as a representative of the Democratic Party. And I, for one, would not, not really be interested in having him involved in this thing.
Well, no. And I mean, honestly, LBJ is legendary. He is a deity amongst a lot of
think about the Twitter files. It was Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and Schellenberger who went in there. They didn't go to three politicians.
Two of them were reporters.
Right. And they went ostensibly they went to reporters. They didn't go to three obscure politicians and say, by the way, we can't go through the Twitter files unless these three congressmen vet it. I mean, it's preposterous.
Yeah, you want Jim DiEugenio, who's like knows every piece of
everything,
and he can also just.
Most of these guys that I know,
BS
most of these guys I know are kind of apolitical in terms of JFK assassination. Now, granted, they are political in their private lives, but they're kind of apolitical when it comes to the research.
No, they want this solved.
Yeah,
this is like a higher calling for them. Scott Harmon, what's your take on Caroline Kennedy coming out so hard against RFK Jr.?
Not the first time. She's been doing it for years. It's not new at all. Not new at all.
Hey, I mean,
she's a deep state operative, party hack. I mean, whatever you want to call Caroline Kennedy at this point. She has a lot at stake here with the Biden administration and her Democratic Party.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well,
there's a lot of Kennedys, right, Eric?
Yeah.
Tomorrow is the hearing for RFK Jr. on C-SPAN.
Well, I'm confused because I think Tulsi starts and then she goes into the private session later. So they're kind of overlapping each other.
I don't know about
over the next 3 days. Like today, I think it started or something started.
Wednesday on TiVo on C-SPAN, it's got a block for RFK Jr. Thursday's got a block for Tulsi Gabbard. That's all I know about TiVoing.
Maybe Tulsi is doing the maybe she's doing the private stuff right now.
I don't know. It's private.
Well, because there's stuff that she's doing the DNI, so they do the closed session.
Okay.
They don't do that with everybody.
Well, they don't have to do it with him. He's just dealing with health.
No. But I'm saying that's why they're kind of overlapping. I think that hers may have.
Oh, but we're not going to see what she does private behind closed doors anyway, right?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not. But
apparently, it must not be the same intelligence committee then.
I'm not sure, but you know what? We'll continue this chat on Locals, which, by the way, has the full version of the Oswald audio drama for those who pay and support. You don't have to pay to be a member of Locals.
You do have to pay to get that.
You do have to pay to get that, but there is a lot there, like commercial-free episodes or ad-free episodes.
Well, I want to put up for members. I'm going to put up my file. It's 29 pages long. Marina Oswald Statements of a Contradictory Nature is the title of it, and I think I'll try to put it up as a PDF after the show. Also, I want to list the books, Eric, of what we used today, because there's a number of books. I don't want people thinking I made this shit up. So maybe we could put the books up. Yeah, we could put it up and pin it underneath the episode for better or for worse. There's a lot of books involved with today.
100%. All right. Well, everybody, we will see you over on Locals momentarily.